Rev it up and welcome to Cars Yeah, show number 2522. Be sure to stick around to the end of today's show because I have something very, very important to share with you. Be prepared to be inspired.
This is Cars Yeah, where you'll enjoy interviews with inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Mark Green is here to provide you with a fuel injection of automotive inspiration. So get in, sit down, buckle up, and get ready for a wild ride here on Cars Yeah.
Hello, inspiring automotive enthusiasts, and welcome to Cars Yeah. Today I'm in Mooresville, North Carolina. Here, there's some NASCAR stuff going on there with a very special guest by the name of Ginger Baker Rust. Hey, Ginger, welcome to Cars Yeah. Do you have any gear? And are you ready to release the clutch?
I am ready.
All right, we're going to have some fun today. Today is a very special show. And as I said at the beginning, stick around to the end because we've got some great news, Ginger and I. I want to start by asking a little bit of an icebreaker question. Would you share something with our listeners that most people don't know about you?
Well, I'll tell you, I have such a love for different genres of music, and most people don't know that I'm actually a very good singer.
Whoa.
Yeah, as I come from a very talented musical family. My grandmother played and sang on the Grand Ole Opry in the 1940s.
What?
And yeah.
Wow.
And she performed on the radio with Red Foley and the Ozarks Jubilee, which was actually a huge national show back in the day. And she sang and performed with the Presleys. And growing up, I performed on stage with both my grandparents numerous times in different venues and sang in church and in the choir in my school. But my grandmother always told me, she said that I could sing before I could talk. So there's actually a raw recording that a friend of mine took, because I don't like to be recorded. And like I said, most people don't even know that I sing, but there's actually a raw recording that a friend of mine took on a cell phone a few years ago of me singing my own version of Amazing Grace, where I sang the lyrics of the song to the melody of House of the Rising Sun.
Oh my gosh.
When I was growing up, actually, those were the first two songs I ever heard and remember, as a kid that my grandparents would play and sing. It was actually uploaded to my private Facebook page for my family and friends, and then it got shared so many times. The last time I looked, it was like over 10,000 views. And that was just on my private.
Wow.
Yeah. And then somebody asked me, says, hey, I really want to share this with somebody, but it's private. And they asked me to post it on my YouTube page, which I did. So that there's a raw video out there on my YouTube page of me singing that song. And it was very, very special to me. And that was just a couple years ago. Wow,
very cool. Well, the talents just keep coming, like pulling the petals off a rose. It just gets beautiful, more beautiful, more beautiful. So that is very good. Well, that's why I like that question. You know what? Everybody learns a little bit more about somebody that they may not know. So Grand Ole Opry, I think the phone's ringing. They're calling. They want you there. So I love it. Well, let me give you a more formal introduction and we can start talking a little bit more about you here. Ginger Baker Rust comes to you from Mooresville, North Carolina, aka Race City, USA. She's a motorsports agent with decades of corporate marketing and experience, accolades, and achievements. Ginger was the chief marketing officer for Ryan Newman, who drove the number 6 Ford in the NASCAR Cup Series. She's the one behind the scenes who works corporate sponsorships, contracts, and the business side of various global motorsports. And if you've ever seen the movie Jerry Maguire, her day-to-day operations are pretty much what Tom Cruise's character does. She is a behind-the-scenes powerhouse in the world of motorsports and has earned the nickname Lady Maverick. There's another reference to Tom Cruise, as she is well respected and has built a solid reputation with everyone from the series owners, drivers, team owners, pit crews, haulers, drivers, and media outlets. Ginger's an amateur racer who earned her NHRA Dragsters pilot's license in 2021, and in 2020 she earned the ECTA land speed record in a 2020 Yenko Camaro street car in the modern street-blown 8-cylinder category. With 199.557 mile per hour pass, don't ever loan a Ginger your car because it might end up on the drag strip. It made her the second fastest woman in the history of the class and the third fastest in the history of national ECTA events. And like I said before, please listen to the end of the show because Ginger and I have some very special news for you. So, Ginger, I want to jump right into this life you created for yourself, specifically around racing. Obviously, beyond your singing music career, you're a car gal, a diehard car gal, an inspiring automotive enthusiast, as we call him here. So, can we go a little bit in the history and have you talk about how did you get involved in what you do? And then we'll dive into some more questions I have for you today. So, take it away.
My dad, when I was little, was a local racer and raced the dirt tracks in the Midwest. I was born and raised in the Ozarks in Southwest Missouri. And as you know, there's a lot of great racers that have come, from around that area, from the Midwest, and, the Wallaces and Mark Martin and Ken Schrader. So my dad raced local stock cars, and then also, when he didn't race stock cars and he kind of finished that, then he started racing local and regional NHRA events. He took me to my first race when I was about 6 or 7 years old. It was actually 1977. And he took me to an NHRA event. And of course, back, then and still today, they're really good about being able to, fans and people in the pits and getting to meet the drivers. So the first driver that I ever got to meet was Shirley Muldowney.
Oh, wow.
And, and just watching her and then getting to meet Connie Coletta and Big Daddy Don Garlitz. And they were just, regular people. You say it now and you think back then, they're still huge, but you look at it differently now than you did then.
They're icons now, right?
I'll tell you, just watching and, my dad, when he would put you on his lap and let me drive the car, and he was always a very fast driver. Even they had a 1957 Chevy that was blue with silver metallic, and it was a beautiful car. He would let me, do the steering wheel. But I'll tell you, when he took me to that first race, there was just something about it. There was this peace. There was the smell of the fuel and the tires and the vibration and the sound of the cars, and just watching, this powerful thing go down a racetrack. And even at that age, I was so enthralled with what I was seeing, and it was just so amazing. And I was hooked. I was hooked.
That'll do that. I always say to people, if you're not really into cars, at least go to one race because it will do that. My wife's never really been into cars much, but way back in the 80s, we lived in Del Mar, California, and they were running the Grand Prix there at the Del Mar racetrack, and I took her to you could hear the cars from her house, and I took her to the race. She went, "This is cool." Now you can just feel it in your chest when the cars go by. So yeah, go try seeing a race. Go to a drag race. Bring your earmuffs, but go to a drag race, right?
Oh, absolutely. I tell people the same thing. I work in the industry and I get introduced to so many people that have never been to a NASCAR race or an NHRA race or a dirt race, and I tell them the same thing. Just go once, or I'll invite them to a race. And I'm really good about trying to bring people that have never been, because especially kids, right? Because I want them to experience, that love affair with racing, or what it's really like behind the scenes. And I can tell you, every person that I have brought to a track that has never been there and showed them behind the scenes and educated them on what racing is really, all about, and just letting them feel the energy and the experience after they've been there. Every single one of them to this day so far, now they watch racing, now they follow racing, and they absolutely have a love for it, including my mother. So
you evolved from what your dad exposed you to creating a career. So how did that start?
Well, I'll tell you, I never saw myself. Growing up in a tiny little farm town in Southwest Missouri, it wasn't really looked upon well for girls or women to be in racing or, sports or other things. I grew up in a great little town, but it was just the times. And very conservative. And so I really didn't see myself. I was the girl in town that would go, with the guys that we would go do outlaw street racing. There's some stories I can tell, but there's some other stories I can't yet until I actually have conversations with my mother.
Okay. Yeah, we don't want to get anybody in trouble here.
But one of the things, I was 12 years old and I wanted to race a car so bad. I just wanted to, but luckily, I got to ride tractors. And when you live around that stuff, you learn to drive things, right?
Right.
But I just wanted so much to just be in a car. So I had a few guy friends that, their dads raced and they had cars. And so they would let me, even at 11, 12 years old, they would let me drive. And there's one night that I pushed our car out of the garage. And my mother's car.
Yeah, one of those. Okay. Yeah.
Quietly out of the garage. We had this grandfather clock, and it was really loud, and it rang 12 times at midnight. And so I knew I had 12
Wait till midnight.
Midnight to be able
I'm only at ring number 8. I still got to get the car out of the garage. Oh, wow. See, you're giving up some secrets here. Okay, if you're young and you're listening, don't steal your parents' car out of the
please
garage.
Don't do this.
No, don't.
Anyway, I'll shorten this story, but I'll tell more details at some other time. But so I pushed the car out of the garage and went, did a little outlaw racing, and then got it back in the garage without being detected later that night.
Good job.
I didn't tell my mother that story until just a few years ago, and that was probably about 47 years later.
Yeah. And her eyebrows go up. Go what?
But no, here's the thing. I really, like I said, my dad was really my inspiration on getting to know a little bit about racing, and then my grandfather. He watched, racing every Sunday, and my grandfather was more in my life, more than my dad. But then, like I said, the guys that I grew up with, a couple of them, and they raced, and they let me work on the car, and we would work on the car in the barn, and they would take me to the races and help me get into the pits when you weren't really allowed. And it was just always my inspiration just to be part of it. But I never saw myself, and I did, like I said, a lot of outlaw racing on the back streets and on farm roads. But I never saw myself being able to do a career until much, much later in life.
Did that have to do with meeting the right people that exposed you to the possibility of a career in this field?
Yes. So in 2006, I actually moved to Mooresville, North Carolina from Missouri, and was really exposed to the world of NASCAR, of course, because I'd always seen it on TV. But Mooresville, North Carolina, when I moved here, it is Race City, USA, and 100% of the NASCAR teams are here. So I started, seeing, everything, the whole economic growth. The whole economy of the town was based on racing. But the greatest thing was that you could go to a restaurant and sit down. And I remember the first time I went to Big Daddy's in Mooresville, a restaurant, a very popular restaurant. It has race cars on the roof and has all this racing memorabilia. And you walk in and you've got legendary drivers like Bobby Allison sitting there having dinner.
Wow.
And you're sitting here and you're hearing the stories, and, and then I see Ryan Newman at the mattress store with his family, and, it's just regular people. And then I started working at Lowe's headquarters, Lowe's Home headquarters, in their private brand and marketing division. And of course they had Lowe's Racing. And, so I got to be exposed to that, made several friends in the industry, and I really wanted to get involved. And earlier in my career, before I had moved to North Carolina, I was a senior account executive and media buyer for the largest media buying company in the world. Oh, and wow. Okay. So I got to work with a lot of sports promotions and sports teams with racing and NFL and NBA and Major League Baseball. And so I had a lot of exposure to that, but not at this level, not the behind the scenes level kind of thing.
Yeah. How cool is that?
Yeah. So I got to go to my first NASCAR race after I moved out here in October 2006. And again, that was the hook. That was the beginning of me. I have to be involved in some way.
Yeah. If you've never been to a live NASCAR race, you got to do it at least once, because it will blow you away. Literally, if you get too close to the track, it'll blow you back a couple seats. So yeah, the power and the momentum and the noise and everything. Well, you've met so many interesting people. So many interesting people that I've got to guess, and you mentioned your dad being an inspiration, your grandfather being an inspiration. Was there maybe in your career life one key mentor that stands out for you that has been very influential or maybe helpful in some way?
Well, I will tell you, I have to talk a little bit about Ryan Newman. There's several influential, in racing that I really enjoy. Of course, Shirley Muldowney, legend. And when I was growing up, Larry Phillips, who should be in the NASCAR Hall of Fame if you're listening, NASCAR, watching him race. But I would have to say Ryan Newman is actually the one that gave me my first opportunity in NASCAR and to be able to work in NASCAR. And I always liked Ryan as a driver, and him and Tony Stewart were actually my favorite NASCAR drivers. I always like Newman because I like the way he drove. I like that he blocked people. I like, the things that he did, and he drove for himself, and I just always thought he was great. And then to get the opportunity that he gave me to break into the sport of NASCAR, I'll have to tell you, he truly just showed me that there's a whole new world that I didn't even realize that there was in racing.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, Ryan is the most intelligent, probably one of the most intelligent people I've ever met, and actually really shy, personally. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't know that about him. And but I got to tell you, he's the one, and he stood for me, and he walked me through the ropes, and he taught me the business. I really admire him and respect him, and I thank him more than he knows for giving me the opportunity that he did.
Well, how fortunate. So you've answered this next question a bit for me. You've surrounded yourself with great people, networked with great people, marketed for great people, and with great people. If there was somebody listening today that wanted to get into the world of sports marketing or racing in some way, what would be your number one piece of advice? It's kind of like Mom used to say, surround yourself with people that are better, faster, and stronger than you, and you'll strive to be them. Don't hang out with the losers because you'll end up being a loser. How would you advise a young person to get into a career path similar to yours?
Well, I will tell you, you can go and you can get a motorsports degree and all that, but it will not teach you what you can learn when you are actually at a race or when you're actually in the pits. I didn't just happen to meet Ryan Newman by chance. When I decided that I wanted to go and try my hand at being a NASCAR, I went to races, to every possible race I could. It's kind of like the Carl Edwards school of, getting in. I mean, I was handing out business cards and talking to anybody I possibly could in the pitch, just, and telling them my background and in marketing and the things that I had done. And I slept in my car. I would go to races. I'd sleep in my car so I could go to the race the next day. Just start talking to people, start networking. You'd be amazed how many, there are 80% of Fortune 500 companies are involved in racing. Most people don't know that, and they think that it's about slapping the logo on, the rear end of the car, but it's not. It's about the network. So I would suggest find someone that's involved in racing, go to a local race, talk to the track owner, talk to the car owners, and just get to know people and get to know the business side of racing. And that's what I would recommend the most, because people forget that racing is sports entertainment. The racing is very real and the competition is very real, but it is a business. Business is what goes on in the pits, and the business is what makes the racing go round or straight, to however you want to do it. So, I would tell anyone, even if you want to be a race car driver, learn the business first, because it is a business.
I've heard this over and over again. I've had several guests on the show that became very prominent race announcers by simply going to the race, trying to hang out in the booth, talk to people. And in one case, a gentleman, one night, the announcer didn't show up. It was a local dirt track race, but he was young and always wanted to do it. And they said, "Hey, kid, you're always up here hanging around. Jump in, get on the mic." And that led to an entire career in race announcing. You just never know being at the right place. Same with race car drivers. We've had hundreds on the show here who said, I just go to every track. I bring my race suit, my helmet. You never know when someone says jump in a car, and it happens. So being around it that's great advice. Of course, you're a regular listener here on Cars Yeah, so you know what's coming next, and that's the challenge question. It's one of my favorites. It's probably one of the most uncomfortable for a guest. However, if you have been through a lot of challenges, they teach you wonderful things. Might not have been so much fun when you were going through it. So could you share one big challenge that when you look back now, you went, what? I sure learned a lot from that. It wasn't much fun, but it taught me some very good advice.
Well, I will tell you that I learned the art of no. And that no doesn't mean necessarily no, but it means maybe. When you're talking about business, you're going to have so many times that people tell you no, or that you feel like, or you've, failed at certain things, or, you didn't overcome an objective. But that's all forms of no. And learning how to not take that personally and accept it as a learning experience, to take your no's and to take your failures. And I got to tell you, working in the marketing industry, in the way I came up through it, and, I didn't have a degree. I had a GED education, didn't have any college background. And so, the biggest obstacle a lot of times has been just overcoming that, of people thinking that, well, your experience doesn't equal, a piece of paper means more than experience. And that's been one of the biggest obstacles I've had to overcome my entire career. So I will tell you that there's a lot of people out there that are so smart, and they have done everything. Learn every single thing that you can about your job, but also learn about everybody else's job. Because if you have an understanding of what everybody else does, and you have an understanding of the business that you're in, that's going to make you more successful. And I think that's the biggest obstacle is being able to overcome, a lot of stereotypical things that are out there in any business. And I will tell you, in the racing business, one of the biggest things that I saw that I wanted to change, and I worked hard on changing, was the perception of females in motorsports. And this isn't about the Me Too or the diversity play or anything like that. It's just the way the industry has been that, women are referred to as the PR girls, even if they're not the PR girl. Mm-hmm. And I would always correct them and say, no, I'm the chief marketing officer for Ryan Newman. I'm not the PR girl. Mm-hmm. And, and it wasn't out of being, don't say that to me or it's below me, but it was, I've earned that title, and that is my title, and that is my job. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'd get paid for. Male or female. If you're the social media manager, have them refer to you as that. And I think, and even the girls, that worked in the sport that I've met, and they would be called that, even though that's not their job. They might be vice president of business development.
Right.
But they were called the PR girl. And I would say, you know what? It's okay. It's okay to say, who you are, right. And what you do. And because that's your job. And so I'd say that's some of the obstacles of some of the ceilings that has had to be overcome. But I can tell you this, I have never had more respect as a woman in an industry as what I have had and gained in motorsports. And I can thank most of the men in motorsports for that.
Well, and times they are a-changing, and they're changing super fast. I talk to my kids, and my wife and I sacrifice an awful lot to send them through college and pay for their college education. And I talk to them now, and they say, if I was going into college now today, I probably wouldn't, because you can learn so much more outside of it. And I'm not saying college is bad. It could be a great experience for you. And if you're going to be a doctor, I kind of think if you're going to be my doctor, I need you to have a little better education than YouTube. Exactly. Although you can learn how to yank a tooth out of your head on YouTube, but maybe not what I want my dentist to learn by. But the point being, it goes back to what you said. Surround yourself with great people, embrace and immerse yourself in the culture, in the world, and try things and know things. So I think it's great. And, learning the art of saying no, that's good for anybody every time, because so many times that we say yes to somebody, you're going, I just really don't want to do this. But you do it, and then inevitably it ends up being, what's that saying about, no good deed goes unpunished. Yeah. It ends up being a disaster. So It's great advice.
When you're in motorsports or marketing or those types, or business development, those types of industries, you have to treat that almost like you do a trade, like you do a vocational trade. Okay, the on-the-job training for those things and the street smarts that you get from that. There's just no way. There's no way. I mean, I actually went back in my 40s and got a associate's degree in motorsports management, and and that's after being in motorsports. And I can tell you, and it really helped me out. One, having the inside knowledge, but two, of being able to see the lack of real world experience that was being taught.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, but I think you have to almost look at it as a vocational trade, because the more hands-on that you are and the more that you're around it, the more you're actually going to learn.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about a bucket list. Somebody as ambitious as you, who's been doing what you've been doing, probably has something out there that they'd like to accomplish moving forward in life. So could you share maybe a bucket list?
So for the past several years, I've been working on a business plan for a race team that provides opportunities for females and youth in motorsports. And I know, again, that sounds like, the whole diversity play on my part, but this plan isn't about being a Me Too movement. That's not my platform. This is a me also plan.
I like that. Me also.
Yeah, it's a me also. As there is not a true laddered structure for females to rise in motorsports, whether it be a driver or business development or marketing, or whatever, but especially for female drivers in the US. And I'm going to get some pushback on this, but I don't believe in putting females in a series just to race other females is actually good for the sport. It gets valuable seat time, and it's created the head nod of supporting women in motorsports, but I believe it actually hurts us. And like I said, I'm sure this statement will get some pushback from others in the sport, but if you think about it, racing is the only sport that is truly equal. If you have the talent, if you have the equipment, and if you have the funds, male or female. The problem is that very few of us are introduced to motorsports or cars as even a possible opportunity. Even when we're young, and it's a rare thing, especially for a girl. The other issue is that out of all of women's sports combined globally, I'm talking basketball, softball, volleyball, track, all women's sports, okay, soccer, which is growing huge. All women's sports combined and globally get less than 1% of all sponsorship money. And motorsports is not even considered or even ranked as a women's sport. So getting funding, it's almost impossible to get funding today for, even if you're Dale Earnhardt or Kyle Busch or Kyle Larson, let alone a young female or a female driver trying to come up some way through the ladder in motorsports. And my bucket list just to some way change that.
Yeah, I've had Lyn St. James on this show, I believe, 4 times. She's been on the show a lot of times. And obviously, she's a huge advocate for that, to try to embrace that, support that, and bring more women into motorsports. So, and I can see, too, versus putting a man on a girls' volleyball team.
Right.
Okay, you've got some challenges there, most likely. Well, not most likely you do, just the physicalness. But in a car, everything's equalized in many, many ways. As long as both drivers are fit, and these days you've got to be fit to be a driver. That whole part of the sport has changed quite a bit. I was started watching the series on Senna.
Yes.
On Netflix. It was quite interesting. And you think back in those days, the difference of motorsports today is so vast, and how strong drivers have to be, especially with the G-forces on the cars and things. So, it's a great series for you listeners. If you haven't watched it, I'm up to episode 3, I think.
I literally just started watching it last night.
Yeah. Well, there you go. We're doing that the same. So let's talk about a special vehicle in your life, one that really stands out for you. Could you share what that vehicle was and a story about it?
Well, I have to say that it was the 2020 Yenko Camaro that I got the privilege to be able, and an unexpected privilege to be able to run at the ECTA event a couple of years ago, that allowed me to have my first. I hadn't been, like I said, when I was young, I had just did some outlaw racing, and the man that owned this car, he knew I loved cars. He knew I'd been around the sport. He knew I did a little bit of outlaw racing when I was young, and I hadn't raced anything in almost 30 years. And we were out at the event. I was actually there on business, and they were one of my clients. And he's like, I want you to get in and see what you think about this car. And I thought, okay, well, I'll get in. I'll drive it around. We were at old abandoned airstrip. Mm-hmm. So I'll just get in and I'll drive it around, and oh man, it was an amazing car. It was, I think, one of 20 that was built that year. So, I got in and he let me drive it, around, and I pulled back up, and I said, it's just an amazing car. And he said, you know what? He said, I think you should go for your ECTA license. So I did, and ended up actually getting that record that you mentioned at the beginning of the show. There's actually a little article about it. It was my little 15 minutes of fame on something that I did. And I'll tell you, people were like, well, weren't you nervous? And I'm like, no. When I got in the seat of that car and knew I was going to do that, it was the most peaceful thing I had felt in forever. It was like I had come home. And I don't think he or anybody that was around that day actually realizes what that meant to me and what it did. But I can tell you that after the article came out, I got a call from Lyn Yenko, Don Yenko's daughter.
Oh, wow.
And because I was the only person that ever had done a land speed in the Yenko. and the only female. And so I got to meet Lynn Yanko and hear the story of her dad. And, that was, like I said, it's beyond special.
So after you made that run, 199 plus miles per, I mean, when you came back, what was everybody doing? They must have been going, girl, where have you been? Oh my.
I think everybody was just kind of in a state of shock because they didn't really expect me to do that. Yeah. I didn't expect me to do that. I didn't even realize, until after when they came up and says, like, you realize that what you just did and, in this class. And I was like, no, I don't, it wasn't even about that. But I can tell you this, I think it actually gave the owner of the car a little bit more push to go a little faster than me the next time.
Sure. Oh yeah. You're like, oh man, she made me look bad. That's funny.
I actually was really worried about that in the car because I was like, what if I go faster? This is my client,
Yeah. So. Go back to that Senna series you and I've started watching that, the scene where he's racing in Monaco and he said he just went into that zone. And
yeah,
of course he crashed, but that was because the radio guy came on and told him to slow down and then he messed up his concentration. But yeah, when you race, having raced, there's sometimes in racing, it's the same. I grew up surfing and there's sometimes in surfing where you take off on a wave and you just feel like you're out of your body almost. It's like, how you don't even think about what you're doing. You just do it. And it's the same with racing. So, well, congratulations. That's very, very cool. But again, I'm not going to loan you my car. Sorry. Not going to happen. Might make me look bad. So we're going to, as you know, as a regular listener, I play car psychologist. So I'm going to crawl in your head a little bit here. If you were reincarnated, manifest, or woman-a-fest, is that even a word? Woman-a-fest? As a vehicle, what would you be and why?
I think you're going to find this very interesting.
Oh, yeah, that's why I asked the question.
I would be a DeLorean.
Okay. Now, I've had a few people that go there. Of course, if they were a teenager or a kid when that movie came out, the DeLorean and all of that, Back to the Future stuff. But why a DeLorean for you?
Well, I kind of can relate because I think the DeLorean was the most underrated and misunderstood achievement and tragedy all in one. And it is a maverick with flaws, built by a maverick, John DeLorean, ahead of its time and during a great time of turbulence. But it survived. And I believe it has the potential to make a comeback, to become more of an icon someday, as it has an opportunity to learn from past mistakes and to be a true legacy that it should be. And that's kind of how I see myself. I don't think I've got a lot of flaws, but I have a maverick mind. And, I think that when you learn from your past mistakes, and I think that I still have a legacy to set.
There you go.
So I kind of equate it with the DeLorean.
I love it. Well, and John's daughter, Kat, I've been seeing her in the news out there a little bit, bringing the brand back, cars back, and that kind of thing. So I have a feeling that might be a good person for a show in the future.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So how about giving back? All of my guests have different ways they found to help others. I've found after interviewing now 2,522 guests here on Cars Yeah that we are our best when we choose to help others. That was the premise of Cars Yeah when I started this show, was inspiring automotive enthusiasts, and that's talking to inspirational people to inspire others that you can get into this field. That was the whole premise of the show. So how about for you? What does that mean for you, giving back?
Well, I'll tell you, I have a lot of people that reach out to me that had asked the question that you did earlier about getting into motorsports, or reach out to me and say, how do you do this, or how did you do that? Even on LinkedIn, I get a ton of messages, but I will tell you this, I always read them. And I always, if they look like they're legitimate, I always respond, just for the fact, and I will generally take a call with them, because I think it's important to give other people an opportunity to learn about the sport. I wouldn't have been able to get in this sport if it wasn't for people that gave me a shot and that just listened to me. And so I do the same. And I will always do that, because I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. We love books here, and there's a great place on the Cars Yeah website called Guest Recommended Books. There's over 3,000 books listed there, so go check it out. And I made it very easy for a quick click to buy. How about a book that you've read that you'd like to share?
I'll actually tell you one of my favorite books, and it's actually about one of my favorite racers back in the 30s. It was about Helene Nice. The book's called The Bugatti Queen by Miranda Seymour. And it's an amazing true story about Helene Nice and what she went through, in trying to be a race car driver back in the 30s.
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite books. Another one that I've been reading is The Best Damn Garage in Town, The Life of by Smokey Yunick. And then the one I got yesterday that I'm going to be reading is The Formula, the new book that just came out by Joshua Robinson and Jonathan Clegg about Formula One.
Awesome. So the library and the reading is full during this holiday season. So that's always a good thing. So before I let you go today, and we dropped some big news that we have for you listeners. So hang with us because I think you might be surprised and a little blown away here today. Let's go on the ultimate drive. I'm an enabler, as you know, so I'm going to park any car in your driveway. Don't worry about the cost. I'm going to write the check. You can take it anywhere in the world, but here's the key. You can take it with somebody, including a person that's no longer with us, which opens up a world of opportunities. So what does the ultimate drive look like for a fast driver like you?
Well, and again, I think it goes back to I would love to drive the original DeLorean, and I would love to take a drive with John DeLorean.
Oh, that's cool. I don't think that's been, people have mentioned DeLorean, but not with John. So if you're sitting with John, taking a drive in his car, what's the first question you'd ask him?
What were you thinking?
What on earth were you, and he's interesting. I've had several guests. Barry comes to mind, who's written books. There's a gentleman who was the first guy working for John DeLorean when he started that brand, and he was the last guy to turn off the lights after everyone had left. Interesting book. I'll put a link to that on this show notes page as well. But yeah, what was he thinking? Well, that goes back to we got to get Kat on this show.
Well, I'll tell you, Kat is a friend of mine, and but I will tell you there is actually a really great documentary that I think a lot of people probably haven't seen that just came out last year because it's been somewhat obscure. But I believe it provides like a really more accurate depiction, and it's very much more detailed about John DeLorean and his quest to build the DeLorean. It's on Amazon Prime, and it's called John DeLorean: The Missing Pieces. It's a 6-part docuseries, like I said, on Amazon Prime, and it's well worth the watch and the couple of bucks for the entire 6-part series. But it actually comes from about 7,000 documents and stories, and of course, Kat's involved with providing a lot of that. But I think it actually gives a really truer picture of what he went through and the obstacles and what he was thinking, versus some of the other documentaries that I've seen in the past on Netflix or some other things that have not been quite accurate.
We'll find a link to that and put it on Ginger's show notes page. The gentleman I was thinking of in past Cars Yeah guest, Barry Wills, wrote the book John Z, The DeLorean and Me, Tales from an Insider. And it's really insightful because, again, he was the first guy that John hired. He set up the factory, hired people, put it all together. And then when the whole thing fell apart and there had to be one guy to shut the lights off and lock the door, Barry was the guy who walked out that door. You can go back and find his show on the Cars Yeah website. And there's another new book coming up, and actually I'm working on getting the author to this book. He's been on the show before, Matt Stone, who's a car guy. It's called DeLorean: The Rise, Fall, and Second Acts of the DeLorean Motor Company. So this is a guest that no doubt in the new year will be a guest here on Cars Yeah. So there you go. That would be a very, very interesting drive. So before I let you go today and we make this announcement, could you share a success quote with me?
Well, I think my favorite success quote is, "Success is only one step further than failure."
Yeah, very cool. You mentioned that in a talk that you and I had with Danny Sullivan that's going to be next week's show. And you listeners may be going, what? A talk with Danny Sullivan with Ginger? So here's some big news I have for everybody. It's very exciting news for me. I would say it's very inspiring news. And starting in the new year, Ginger Baker Rust will be the new voice, the new host, and the new driver. I am going to give her the keys. Can you believe it? Here on Cars Yeah, that's right. I'm going to be parking the car, stepping out, retiring, which will mean some different things for me, and handing Ginger the keys to the show. And I wanted to just say this before I have Ginger say a few words about this. Back when I started Cars Yeah, it was 2014, 10 and a half years ago. Everybody said I was crazy. Nobody really knew what a podcast even was back then. I decided that this show, I wanted it to live on past me. And that's why it's not like the Joe Rogan show. No, I wish I could say I'm like Joe Rogan as far as the audience goes, but he's got a different thing going. I wanted Cars Yeah to not be the Mark Green show. I wanted it to be Cars Yeah. And I really wanted it to be about the guests. And the whole idea was, of course, inspiring people through listening to inspiring stories like we've listened to Ginger's today. And so when I started thinking about what was next for me, I really was worried that this show wasn't going to be able to go on. And I'll tell you listeners that I reached out to Ginger. Do you remember the first time I contacted you, how many years ago that must have been?
Oh, gosh.
A guest on the show. I mean, it was 6, 7, 8.
It's 6, 7, 8 years ago.
Something like that. And she had some things going on in her life, and it wasn't a good time for her. And I just kind of stayed in touch. I think I dropped a fishing line here and there. And I thought, well, I'm not sure if I'm ever going to get this lady on the show, but maybe one day. I'm a bulldog. I don't give up on people. As you listeners know, Jay Leno, I chased him for 9.5 years. And last Christmas, he was a guest. Finally, I got him, by golly. So in this case, Ginger and I started talking back in May of this year, I believe it was. And she expressed some interest. And as I learned more about Ginger, I went, this is a very interesting person. I mean, she is in the industry. She knows more people in the racing industry than I probably do. She set land speed records. She's got her dragster pilot's license. And so, I just wanted to say that I'm really honored here because I never dreamed who could carry this on. I had a lot of people interested when I started talking to people, but the fact that it would be a woman too never really crossed my mind. But I'm like you, I'm not into the DEI thing or anything. I look at men and women as the same. I've had hundreds of women on this show, and I always look at, well, I don't really care what gender they are, as long as they're in the car industry, they're inspiring, they're focused, they're successful. That's what I really wanted to have, who I wanted to have on the show. So, but the fact that I have that many women on the show told me that there was hope in the industry and that this was a place for women to be too. So again, I just wanted to say that I'm incredibly honored that I got to meet you, Ginger, and the fact that you're going to be taking the keys to the show. It makes me feel really good that starting in January, I'm going to wake up and listen to Cars Yeah, and there'll be this other host there. It'll be probably kind of weird for me at first. And don't worry, listeners, because I'm going to be helping Ginger along as we do this transition. As I mentioned, next week's show, Ginger and I talk with Danny Sullivan. Turns out she's a good friend with Danny's co-host, Tony Stewart. She knows his nickname is Smoke. I didn't even know that. So I felt like, okay, after doing that show, we've already recorded that show, by the way, but it'll be next Thursday. And I went, this makes me feel really good because Ginger's part of the gang. She's part of the crowd. So I just encourage all you listeners to give Ginger the same support, the same love, the same kind listening ears, and reach out to her, talk to her, let her know what you want her to do, maybe different. This show's going to become her show. And while you may hear some of the same questions, I'm sure she's going to mix it up and change it a little bit. But I'd love for you, Ginger, just to say a few things to the listeners here now that we've dropped this wonderful news. And I'm very, very excited about this, about what the listeners may expect from you in the new year.
Well, I got to tell you, first of all, I am beyond humbled and honored to step in your shoes. And there's no way that I could fill them. For me, the most important thing about Cars Yeah and the legacy that you have set, to me, that's the most important, is to continue that success and continue that legacy in the way that it has been done and the way it was meant to be. And this isn't about coming in and making a big change. There'll be some changes. And of course, there's going to be people that I'm going to bring on that you haven't had on. But, this is scary for me because I have some large shoes to fill. And it's really, really important to me that people understand that I'm doing this because I have a passion for cars and I have a passion for motorsports and classic cars and the vintage industry and the racing industry. And I have a passion to continue it because, if we don't make people more aware of this industry or of vintage cars and classic cars and just have people fall in love with cars again or racing, we're not going to have this around. And so I want to make sure that this show inspires not only the current listeners and your followers that you've had for so many years, but hopefully to get new listeners and to inspire them just as much. And so I can't thank you enough for this opportunity. And I'm glad that we finally got together, and it's absolutely amazing that it's at this degree.
Well, this is what I've learned about talking to Pete. You just never know where things will go. And again, I'm just thrilled, and I encourage, this couldn't have happened without the listeners, people being supportive. I have friends now all over the world. And after doing this for 10 and a half years, I could probably go to any country and ring somebody up and say, hey, I'm here. Can we get together? And there'll be somebody there that's been a past guest. And you're going to find the same thing beyond the friendships that you have in the industry. So again, listeners, feel free. You can still continue to reach out to me. I'll still have a social media presence. I'll still be out there talking, supporting Ginger mostly. That'll be my big goal moving into the next year, but I encourage you to give her some love and support and listen to what she has to say. Ginger, I know the show's gone a little bit long, but I knew it kind of would because this is a very special show. I mean, it's probably the most special show for me. So before you and I talk again next week with Danny and the other guests we have coming up in December here, I just want to thank you for becoming a friend and becoming a trusted new host and driver for this show. It means the world to me. And as I always say at the end, until you and I talk again, I'll see you down the road.
I'm so looking forward to it. And thank you so much for the opportunity, Mark. It is truly a pleasure.
It's going to be fun. Keep listening.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's ride here at Cars Yeah. Drive on over to carsyeah.com to find show notes and inspiring automotive fun. Download your free copy of Filler Up, a fun book filled with gorgeous photographs of fuel filler fun, including quotes from more inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Download your copy today, and we'll see you next time on Cars Yeah.